is here to bring you the weird, the unusual, the spectacular, and the strange. Strange has got to be part of it. So we are going to be spending the this next time with you, and hopefully you'll take Slooh with you outdoors to look for shooting stars. Now, of course, if it's cloudy, you're not going to see any. Sometimes people actually ask that. Okay, should I hold it for a second or keep speaking? Okay, great. Well, here we are at Slooh. Glad that you could join us tonight. And, look out the window and see if it's clear or if it's cloudy. If it's cloudy, then you could still stay with us while we talk about meteors, meteor showers, the Leonids, what makes them special, and what's coming up. Because the best meteor shower of the year, if it's not tonight, there's one coming up in just a couple of weeks from now. So we'll talk about how you see that one. But if it is clear tonight, then still stay with us. Take us outside to your backyard. Hopefully, you live out in the country, far from the city. I know very few people do that because about 10 years ago, in case you missed the news, the world's population reached a milestone. And at that point, more than half of the world lived in cities. Before that point, about 10 years ago, more than half of the world lived out in the boonies, in the country, in agrarian places. And so the world did a major, changeover at that point. And along with city and urban life, there comes some good things like better pizza than you can get out in the country, but bad things like more light pollution, which is one of the reasons that Slooh brings you so many shows, because even if your skies are crummy, we'll bring you the universe anyway. But tonight, we want you to go out, and we're saying this partially because our favored site in the Canary Islands is cloudy at the moment. So we'd like you to go out and we'll tell you what to look for and why the Leonids are so special. And they are special. They gave us the best meteor shower of our lives, but it goes back way before that. It turns out that there is a particular comet named Tempel-Tuttle, and when that comet passes not too close to Earth, but close enough, some material falls off, and there's a 33-year periodicity where Earth can go right through the thicker parts of this comet debris. And at such times, we can get spectacular meteor showers. That happened in 1799, 1833, 1866, but not in 1899 and 1933. So people thought, well, something happened. Maybe Jupiter perturbed the comet and we're not going to get those great meteor showers anymore. But 1966, there it was again, that 33-year period, and there was again a meteor storm. What do we mean by meteor storm? I spoke to two people who actually saw it accidentally because nobody was expecting it. One of them was on a train. I even remember her name, Victoria Drowns. Unusual name, right? She was on a train in Texas in the wee hours of the morning and looked out the window. And can you imagine 50 or 60 shooting stars every single second? All of them whizzing away from the same part of the sky, the constellation Leo, near the star Algeba. It seemed as if, she said, that there was a hole drilled into the heavens, into the black firmament, and leaking out from this hole were sparks in all directions, because meteors always radiate away from one spot in the sky. And the constellation that they radiate away from gives the meteor shower its name. It's the Latin possessive form of that constellation. So if it's Orion, we call them the Orionids. If it's Perseus, then the shower gets known as the Perseids. Well, this is the Leonids, so they come from Leo. And imagine 60 shooting stars 60 meteors a second. That's what was seen in the early hours of November 18th, 1966. It had last been seen like that in 1866 and was seen in 1833. But it hadn't been seen now for more than a century. But there it was repeating. So, of course, all of us were looking forward to 1999, that 33-year periodicity, but it was not a great shower that year or the next. But in 2001, I hope you went out that morning, in the hours before dawn of November 18th, 2001, we had not a storm, no, not one of those 50 or 60 meteors a second scenes, but we still had a respectable 5 to 6 shooting stars per minute, every minute. And they were all green, and they all left behind long, lingering trains. That's what they're called. You know, they're not choo-choo trains, electric trains. That's what a trail behind a meteor is called, a train. And they all had these lingering, beautiful green trains. 5 a minute. Wow. The best meteor shower of our lives. And that was the Leonids. So, of course, that left us with a warm place in our hearts for the Leonids. And ever since then, we've been watching it. But I have to tell you that the experts who calculate these things, Peter Jeniskins, for example, worked with NASA, one of the world's leading meteor experts, told me personally, gave me future projections for the other major showers, the Geminids and the Perseids. But the Leonids are not expected to go through a thick section when the Earth is not supposed to hit a thick Leonid section of that comet, Tempel-Tuttle, until 2099. Although we might get a fairly decent shower in the year 2030. So bottom line is that between now and the year at least 2030, the Leonids give us a so-so shower. We're talking about 15 per hour, one every 4 minutes or so. Now, that's not like the Geminids that we're expecting on the night of December 13th to 14th that will also bring you here at Slooh. It's not like the Perseids. But when you do see one, they do tend to be bright. They do tend to leave behind lingering trains. And one of the reasons is that they're so darn fast. They may be the fastest of all meteor showers. They come in at 44 miles a second. I mean, we thought the Perseids were fast at 37 miles per second. 44 miles per second, that's almost unbelievable. And that means that the material from that comet hits us head on. We're going around the sun, we meaning planet Earth, we're going around the sun at 18.5 miles per second. It means it's coming at us at even slightly more than that speed. Head-on collision. That's what's producing these meteors tonight. Head-on collision with these little bits of ice, because that's what we get from comets, kind of dirty pieces of ice. And each typically the size of an apple seed. A really big one might be the size of a grape. That's unusual, though. And that's what we're seeing tonight. So don't expect the sky to be filled with them. No, we're not going to get that until 2099. Or even a rich shower, meaning one a minute. We won't get that until at least 2030. Now, tonight, maybe one every 4 or 5 minutes, but because they're bright, because they're fast, it's worth looking for. So if you have clear skies, and especially if you're outside the lights of a city, well, go on out, bring us with you. This is being heard on all of Slooh's different ways that you can hear us. So bring us out with you. We're going to have others besides myself telling you different aspects of the Leonid shower. Helen Avery will be here a bit later to bring you the lore and legend and mythology that surrounds Leo and the Leonids. And I'll be talking about the astronomy aspect, the physics, the actual things that we can expect. You know, if you know something about backyard astronomy, you can sort of be a Sherlock Holmes. You could be a detective, and things will make sense. Astronomy is one of those things where most of it makes sense. I mean, quantum physics doesn't make sense. How can there be entangled particles where if you look at an electron, it goes from a blurry thing to a real electron, and its entangled twin, even if it's on the other side of the galaxy, knows that you looked at its twin and immediately reacts in real time? I mean, how can that make sense? It doesn't. But astronomy, by and large, does make sense. So, for example, listen to this. The direction that Earth is traveling through space as we go around the sun is highest up at dawn. The direction toward which we're traveling in space is in the eastern sky at midnight. It just rises at midnight. So if you look east at midnight, you're looking ahead as Earth is going around the sun. You're in the pilot's seat. You're in the driver's seat. You're looking forward. And in a meteor shower, that the meteors are coming at us in a head-on collision type thing, which is what's happening with the Leonids. They're coming straight at us. The direction that they come from would be there, just rising at midnight. And so starting at midnight is when you see more and more of these shooting stars, because you're then facing the direction that they're coming at you. And they reach their maximum at dawn. Of course, at dawn, it's getting bright. The sun is rising. So let's say an hour and a half before dawn, when it's still dark out, just before dawn. And yet that radiant point, the direction towards the meteors, are now at their highest point. They're overhead. In this case, it's the constellation Leo. And so what we're saying is that if Leo rises at midnight, which it does on this date, tonight, which will put it at its highest point at dawn, that means that that's when the meteor shower will be really picking up. That's when you'll see the maximum number starting then. And if you just know enough to recognize Leo, it looks a little like a backwards question mark. Well, then that's all you need to know to see where the meteors are radiating from. By contrast, consider the situation in just a few weeks, on the night of December 13th to 14th, when we'll be back here at Slooh to bring you the Geminid shower, which, by the way, will be the best meteor shower of the entire year. None of this business of, oh, yeah, you'll see one every 4 or 5 minutes. No, then you'll see one a minute. And those are slow-moving meteors, which are kind of easier to spot. And how do we know that they're slow without me even telling you that? Well, it's because the Geminids obviously radiate away from the constellation Gemini. And if you go out 9 o'clock at night on December 13th, Gemini will already be up. So if it's already out, that means it's not in that position low in the east at midnight. It's not in the forward direction as Earth is going around the sun. It's already high up. So this already tells you that those meteors must be coming at us not straight on, not with head-on collisions, but the sideways. And sure enough, the Geminids are slow meteors. They go about 22 miles a second. That's slow by meteor standards. So remember, these meteors tonight are 44 miles per second. The Geminids are half that speed exactly, 22 miles a second. And it shows. Those look like slow-moving meteors. You can even see the individual meteoroid as it moves across the sky, as opposed to tonight's meteors that are all streaks because they're so blazing fast. Geminids look like little dots moving across the sky. In truth, you're not really seeing the meteor even then, because who can see an apple seed that's 60 miles high? That's how high up these meteors are at their closest. They're 60 miles. Most of them are more like 90 miles, 80 miles. 60 is the lower limit. You can't see an apple seed, even if it's brilliantly glowing, at a distance of 60 miles. So what we're really seeing tonight and then is the glowing air around the fast-moving meteoroid. In other words, the meteoroid is heating up the air to incandescence. It's ionizing the air, stripping electrons from it. And it's that glowing bubble of super hot air surrounding the meteoroid that makes up the meteor that you think you're seeing. When you say, oh, look at that meteor. We call it a meteor, but we're really seeing a bubble of air surrounding this little tiny particle. So moving slowly, 22 miles a second, coming up in a few weeks when we bring you the Geminid meteor shower, and super fast tonight with the Leonids. These are the fastest. This is it. This is the record holders tonight. So hopefully you're listening right now and you're outdoors, looking at the sky. Remember, they will increase their number as the night goes on. So there'll be some now, but any meteor you see now has to be rising up from Leo, the radiant, which is still below the horizon. So if you face east, that would be the best direction to face right now. You'll see meteors, and all of them will seem to be coming upward from the east. Although some, having gone upward, will then cross the sky. So you could see some others blazing across the sky, but always looking as if they're coming from the east as a direction of travel. But starting at midnight, when Leo is up, then you'll start to see the Leonid meteors not just rising up from that spot, but also going sideways from that spot, moving to the right, moving to the left from Leo itself. And as the night goes on, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, as Leo gets higher up in the east, then you'll start to see meteors that are not just rising up from Leo or going to the right from it and to the left, but also downward from Leo. You'll be seeing them in all directions, radiating away from that backwards question mark, which makes up the mane of Leo the Lion. And so it's kind of fun to watch the change in where the meteors are seen as the night goes on. Along with that change, we see more of them, because obviously, if we're looking at meteors that are not just going in one direction, upward from Leo, which is the case right now at this time of night, but you can also start seeing meteors going to the left and right of it, which is true at midnight and 1 a.m. And then by 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, even meteors that are going down from it, you're seeing more of them. You're catching more of the shooting stars. So that's why as the night goes on, they increase their number. Naturally, if it's cloudy where you live, forget the whole thing. Forget everything I've said, because you won't see a thing. Maybe you're hanging out with someone on a first date. That's pretty good. Nice, cheap. I shouldn't say cheap. Inexpensive. Natural date. Nature. So these are the Leonids. For reasons that no one understands, the meteor showers of the year are crammed into a 5-month period. The great meteor showers begin with the Perseids on August 11th. And then we have the Orionids, which is a medium strength shower, the Leonids, the Geminids, and then in early January, first week of January, usually around January 3rd or 4th, the Quadrantids. And then it's over. No more meteor showers. It's true that there are some minor ones, and in desperation, sometimes we bring you them, but by minor, we mean maybe one meteor every 10 minutes or so, skimpier showers that can be seen in April or May, but not a lot of meteors. Even the background meteors, what are called sporadics, the meteors that are not part of any shower, the ones that are just can be seen any night, especially between midnight and dawn. There are about 6 an hour, and they are all called sporadics. They're not part of any meteor shower. But even those diminish in number, from January through August. Bottom line here is that the meteor time of the year is from August through the first week of January. And we're right in that period right now. So even if the Leonids per se only produce a few brilliant meteors, well, at least they're bright and fast, and their trails tend to linger. By contrast, when we see the Geminids, even though they're more numerous coming up on the night of December 13th to 14th, even though there's one a minute, only about 3% of those, 1 in 30, leaves behind a glowing trail in the sky called a train that lingers, just stays in the sky for a few seconds, like a Cheshire cat smile. You know, in Alice in Wonderland, the teeth just kept grinning and staying in place for a few extra seconds. Boy, Lewis Carroll, I don't know what he was smoking, but whew, strange images there in Alice in Wonderland. Well, that's what we get when you see these glowing trains remaining in the sky. And that's what happens tonight with the Leonids. The very high proportion of them, higher than any other meteor shower, leave behind glowing trains that linger for several seconds. So another one of the reasons that even though it's not a rich shower, except once every 30 years or so, and now we have to wait till 2099, so that's even a lot longer than 30 years. Nonetheless, the meteors that we do see are special. They're unusually bright, unusually fast, and an unusual percentage of them have these glowing trains. So, see, worthwhile. And so hopefully you're outside now, and you'll, even if you go out, see maybe only one or two in the course of time, you'll go out again later, recheck the sky, because they will increase as the night goes on. And so of the 88 constellations, how many of them have their own meteor showers named for them? Not a lot. We have the Aquariids, the Quadrantids. Quadrantids are crazy because that's the constellation name that doesn't exist anymore. It's one of those antique names that got torn up and thrown away when the International Astronomical Union convened in 1930, and they had decided that some of the old constellations were no longer going to exist, and Quadrans was one of them. And yet we kept the name of the meteors that radiate from there, not too far from Boötis, not too far from the Dippers, the Quadrantids, typically January 3rd. The Perseids, everybody remembers those from summer camp. Those are those great summer meteors. Those are the best, really, the Perseids and the Geminids in terms of richness, because they're almost every year you can count on a meteor a minute. The main variation with them, and with most showers, is whether or not the moon is interfering. And that's another thing we have going for us with the Leonids right now. We have an absent moon, dark skies. So if you do have clear skies, if you're hearing this, and you're not in the middle of a city where, of course, just the light pollution, normal light pollution in a city is going to make it very hard to see meteors. But if you're out even in the suburbs, definitely go out and check it out. And stay with us, because we'll have other things coming up too. We'll have Helen Avery coming up in about 5 minutes or so, maybe 6 or 7 minutes, and talking about a very different aspect of the meteor shower tonight. I'm looking forward to that myself. And so you're joining us. This is Slooh. We bring you the best of the universe, whether it's an asteroid that's coming frighteningly close, and we got a lot of callers who say, I'm glad we're tuning in, because the government would not tell us the truth if the asteroid were about to destroy Earth, but we trust that you'll tell us the truth. That's very flattering, but hey, the government's not going to lie to you about that. They may lie about everything else, but astronomers are blabbermouths. They can't keep a secret. And so if an astronomer really found a giant asteroid on a collision course with Earth, the first thing he would do is what you or I would do: tell all his friends, tell his family, and tell the press maybe, and it would all leak out. There's no there would never be a government, conspiracy to keep it quiet that the Earth we're about to end. No, you'd hear it almost immediately. Although it would not be like the movies, the mass extinctions that an incoming meteor or an asteroid supposedly causes. When the world finds out that a giant asteroid is about to collide. In the movies, it shows everyone panicking in the streets, running this way and that way. Everybody's running in the streets. I always wondered about that. I mean, where does anyone think they're going to go? Earth is about to be destroyed. It wouldn't seem that you'd gain any advantage by moving to any other location, right? But that's what people are doing. They're rushing back and forth. In real life, you know what people will do. They'll pick up the phone and they'll call their friends and say, "Hey, did you hear about that?" So, but I'm glad that those who do not trust the government, they come here to Slooh, and it's true. Thanks to our great engineers like Paul Cox, who tracks these things, and we really monitor how close they come, close by asteroids whizzing past Earth. We've done this time and time again. And eclipses, lunar and solar, meteor showers, all manner of occultations and planetary close approaches, oppositions, and, anytime anything spectacular happens in the sky, just file it away in your brain. And then come here, because Slooh will be doing it, tracking it through the giant telescopes on the Canary Islands, and bringing you commentary, and we're gonna really do that stuff to see as wide a view of the sky as you can see, and then look for a meteor that crosses a huge piece of sky. So it's quite a very different optical requirement than the normal Slooh business, where we want powerful telescopes zooming in and bringing it to you. But we would still bring it one every maybe 4 or 5 minutes. And now we're going to go to Helen Avery, who's going to bring us another aspect of the meteor shower. So hope you're enjoying this, and take it away, Helen.
Hi, thanks, Bob. So good evening, everyone. My name is Helen Avery, and you are here with Slooh, in case you didn't know. And we are here for the Leonids Meteor Shower, as Bob was just talking about. And if you just joined us, you may be disappointed to see that our telescopes are clouded out this evening. We normally have the all-sky cam and the constellation cam, so we can all count meteors and shooting stars together. But unfortunately, there's some clouds in the Canary Islands. But maybe that encourages people to step outside instead and take us with you, and look to the east at the moment, as Bob said, when you're looking for the meteor showers. And then as the night goes on, that will gradually move upwards and become more prolific. There'll be more of them. So Bob mentioned that I was going to talk about the law of Leo, the constellation Leo, this evening, and a bit of the legend, which I had every intention of doing. There is so much to say about Leo. It's been such an important constellation for us, for 6,000 years of just records alone, so probably far before that. But there has been a bit of a change of plan, because I was reading earlier this week from an old astronomy book, and I'm going to read it to you in a minute, that talked about the Leonids Shower of 1833. When I started looking into it, it was such a moving and powerful story of this particular meteor shower that I thought, actually, we should probably honor this part of US history and talk about that instead this evening. So I'm just going to read you, because I just found it so fascinating. It was I have this lovely old astronomy book called New Works on Physics by Gillette and Rolfe on Astronomy, and it was published in 1882. And I'll just read you. says, while the November meteors are not usually very numerous or bright, a remarkably brilliant display of them has been seen once in about 33 or 34 years, which Bob was explaining earlier. The last brilliant display of these meteors was in the years 1866 and 1867, so just remembering that this was written in 1882. The display was visible in this country, it's the US, only a short time before sunrise and didn't attract general attention. The display of 1833, however, was remarkably brilliant and caused great consternation among the ignorant and the superstitious. So this really intrigued me because I thought, well, what was America like in 1833? What would it have been like to have seen a Leonid meteor shower? But it wasn't just any Leonid meteor shower. As it turns out, it was, as Bob mentioned, a meteor storm. And a meteor storm that I don't think has been surpassed since this time. So I wanted to share with you some of the newspaper reports that came out about this particular meteor storm, so you can really get a sense. But first, I'm going to sort of invite you to just maybe put yourself for a moment in the year 1833 in the US, and it's Thursday, November 12th. And the mood in the US is a certain type of dis-ease. There's a bit of a lack of harmony. So what's happening in 1833 in the US? Well, the population is a little over 14 million people. That's it. And there are just 24 states at this point in time. And of those 14 million people, 2 million are slaves. And during this period, more than half of the US's exports are in cotton, with much of that going to Britain, who's having an industrial revolution and is taking that cotton and making textiles and then selling that on. Also at this time, President is Andrew Jackson. He's just been re-elected to his second term this very year. He's the 7th president of the United States, if you can imagine that, just the 7th one. And he is a man who's got a bit of a mixed reputation. So Andrew Jackson was sort of a distinguished soldier. He'd fought in many battles and against the British and received a lot of honor for that. He also sort of brought himself up out of poverty and portrayed himself as a man of the common person. He wanted to help the common people. He was also very good at economics. He is the only president in existence to have paid off the national debt. But there was then sort of another side to President Andrew Jackson that some people were beginning to get a bit unhappy about. And that was Andrew Jackson was a slave owner. He was a Democrat from Tennessee. And obviously being down south with a lot of his constituents down there, supported the slave trade. He also had another unpopular sort of trait in that he was very anti-Native Americans, and he relocated Native Americans in the Indian Removal Act that ultimately led to the Trail of Tears. So while Andrew Jackson seemed to be doing a lot for the economy and had a lot, he was pro-business and half the country really liked him, half were beginning to wonder if whether morally this president was right for them. So although he got in that second term, there was a bit of discord happening. And if you think about this particular time as well, the railroads were just taking off. 1830, so just 3 years before, was the first, I think, commercial and freight railroads through the US. So if you can imagine, people were starting to travel around more. And much like now with globalization, as people traveled around, some people didn't like what they were seeing. People from the north went down to the south, didn't like the fact that the South was making a lot of money out of slavery, and were against owning slaves. And sort of information was traveling a lot faster between people because of the railroads. So this sort of discord was beginning to really sort of, get louder and louder. If you sort of imagine yourself in this country at this time, and also what had just happened was the North had managed to get through a tariff, which impacted the southern businesses, the cotton farmers, tremendously, and that was sort of being renegotiated to soften it for them. So economically, there was also beginning to be this real back and forth between the North and the South. It had already started, and even though the Civil Wars and for many years later. So there's this real dis-ease, and the newspapers only report politics. And it's all opinion. Sounds familiar, right? So it's just a lot of politics. They stay well clear of anything to do with science or local events. And that is until this particular night, November the 12th, 1833. So I'll just read you a couple of the accounts. So here we go. This is from a Victorian astronomy writer. On the night of November 12th, a tempest of falling stars broke the earth. The sky was scored in every direction with shining tracks and illuminated with majestic fireballs. At Boston, the frequency of meteors was estimated to be about half that of flakes of snow in an average snowstorm. Their numbers were quite beyond counting, but as it waned, a reckoning was attempted from which it was computed, on the basis of that much diminished rate, that 240,000 must have been visible during the 9 hours they continued to fall. Well, other estimates put it far, far above that. Other accounts say that between dusk and dawn, every hour, about 100,000 meteors appeared to sort of come down to Earth. They were like fireballs. So you think today, if we're watching a meteor shower, crikey, if I saw 100 in an hour, I think I would have hit the lottery. But 100,000 in an hour, what would that have meant for people? And in 1833, no one had any idea what it was. So you just, dusk falls, you step outside, and all of a sudden the sky is just full of these blazing meteors. It was described as snowing fire and by some people, and I'm going to read you some more of the descriptions of that particular night because it's very poignant, but for reasons we'll come to in a moment. So some of the in Missouri, there was many of the stories were captured by a place in Ray County, and so I'm just going to read you a couple of the things that people there said. Excuse me. So Edward and Bethelyn Wall of Missouri happened to be moving their family of 11 from Kentucky that particular night, and they landed in Lexington sort of just in the morning of sort of November 12th into November 13th. And this is what they said in their story, what their account to someone else. As they could not cross the Missouri River on the boat that day, they camped at the Slusher farm. That was the night the stars fell. One of the family, seeing the sparks, called to the squire, saying, "Stop stirring the fire. You might set the tent afire." He answered, "I'm not even touching the fire. Just come here and look." The family was aroused and they thought the world was coming to an end. The stars showered down so thickly and fast that it looked as though every star in the heavens was falling. And when they touched the ground, they burst and drifted away. Stars were still falling when the sun rose the next morning. Never before had there been such a sight witnessed, nor has there been since this great meteoric display of our age. So imagine this. This is happening across all of America. Everything east of the Rockies, rather, is where they're having this meteor shower. No one knows what it is. It's happening in every single town east of the Rockies. So there are reports in all of the newspapers the next morning. There's reports from Pennsylvania, and all of this is online if you ever wanted to look at the reports of that particular night. And a lot of the headlines were very against what the newspapers were reporting at that time, in terms of they were only covering politics, and they obviously didn't know what it was, so they couldn't comment on that. They were saying things like, God God's gift to us, and some were saying it's the end of the world, but mostly the newspapers were trying to play down this sense it was the end of the world, and that's really what people felt. For example, there's a diary by someone called Michael Shiner, and he reports the meteors fell from the elements on Thursday in Washington. It frightened the people half to death. If you can imagine, there were reports of people sort of lying down and crying. It sort of became thought of as this judgment day. And given the environment, that was particularly important for reasons we'll go into in a moment. So another story that came out of that night, it was from Missouri. It was out of Mormon history. And this is the account. As the saints were being driven from Jackson County, several hundred refugees lay on the banks of the Missouri River, many sleeping on the ground. They woke at 2 a.m. to witness one of the most spectacular showers of meteors in recorded history. Elder Parsley Pratt was there, and he described it. About 2 o'clock the next morning, we were called up by the cry of the signs of the heavens. We arose, and to our great astonishment, all the firmament seemed enveloped in splendid fireworks, as if every star in the broad expanses had been hurled from its course and sent lawless through the wilds of the ether. Thousands of bright meteors were shooting through space in every direction, with long trains of light following their course, and it lasted for hours. Every heart was filled with joy at this majestic display of signs and wonders. Another story is from a gentleman called Samuel Rogers, who says, I heard one of the children cry out in a voice expressive of alarm, "Come to the door, Father, the world is surely coming to an end." Another account said, see, the whole heavens are on fire. All the stars are falling, and these cries brought us all into the open yard to gaze upon the grandest and most beautiful scene my eyes have ever beheld. It did appear as if every star had left its moorings and was drifting rapidly in a westerly direction, leaving behind a track of light which remained visible for several seconds. I mean, it's just amazing that we have all these wonderful reports of something so long ago. But here is what I find the most sort of poignant and moving about this particular meteor shower. So, as I mentioned before, 2 million of the US's 14 million people are slaves. And there was this sort of, as I mentioned, this unease that was growing. The North were, people were seeing things they didn't like, things that made them uncomfortable. And the people in the South who owned slaves, you can sort of imagine that people coming down from the North and judging them and sharing their opinions and being a witness to what they were doing down there. So there was this sort of, I can't really describe it as anything other as I imagine like an underlying dis-ease happening. So some of the stories from this particular night say that the slave owners felt like it was a judgment day. Obviously not all of them, but some of them felt it was a judgment day for them. And I came across this beautiful testimony, and it was passed on orally to a woman who shared it from her great-great-great-grandmother. So her name of this particular slave girl was Amanda, and she was from Tennessee. And as I say, as she grew up, when she grew up, she shared this with her family, and it was passed down. And this is a quote from Amanda. Somebody in the quarters started yelling in the middle of the night to come out and to look up at the sky. We went outside, and there they was a-falling everywhere. Big stars coming down real close to the ground. And just before they hit the ground, they would burn up. We was all scared. Some of the folks were screaming and some was praying. We all made so much noise, the white folks came out to see what was happening. They looked up and then they got scared too. But then the white folks started calling all the slaves together, and for no reason they started telling some of the slaves who their mothers and fathers was, and who they'd been sold to and where. The old folks were so glad to hear where their people went. They made sure we all knew what happened, you see. They thought it was Judgment Day. I just find this so incredibly moving. And there are reports like this from so many different places about this particular night. And there are reports also of, which breaks my heart, of slaves. One gentleman said he walked out and 100 slaves on the plantation were lying with their backs on the floor, looking upwards at the sky, screaming and crying to be saved, which is just absolutely heartbreaking. But you just sort of can imagine what people were going through when something so unfamiliar and unexpected and that they couldn't explain was happening to them. But the impact of that night was absolutely tremendous because it inspired a greater anti-slavery movement. Just 1 month later, the American Anti-Slavery Society was set up. And as we all know, things got a lot worse from 1833 until the Civil War. And the number of slaves doubled actually over that period. But it was sort of seen as people looked back on this Leonids Meteor Shower as this moment where it was like something stirred in the sort of conscience of many people in America. That those up north said, you know, what we've seen we can no longer ignore. You know, this is like a call to us to take action. And then some slave owners actually just let their slaves go or turn their backs on their plantations and left. Obviously, not that many, but it was really like a turning point. And so it's so just amazing to me that we get to, you know, one, we have the records of this, and two, we get to go out tonight and we get to sort of look up and as free people and look at the stars and look at the Leonid meteor showers. We're not going to see 100,000 an hour for sure, but we might see one or two, and how lucky we are just to see one or two. So a couple of things I wanted to sort of mention that I thought were poignant about this particular 1833 Leonids meteor shower was that the next meteor shower, if you remember, we said that the meteor storms were every 33, 34 years. So the next meteor storm in the United States was in 1866. So in 1866, the Civil War had been fought and had ended. Just like about 12 months before, or 11 months before the 1866 Leonids meteor shower, the 13th Amendment had been ratified to abolish slavery in the country. So it just blows my mind to think of, you know, maybe someone like the story we heard from Amanda, who she was a child when she saw the 1833 Leonids meteor shower, but maybe in 1833 she saw that Leonids meteor shower as a slave, and then in 1866 she saw it as a free woman. It's really phenomenal what could happen. And you know, you sort of think, when you see something like that, and this is why, you know, it's so wonderful at Slooh, we get to come together and look up at the sky together, because when you see something in the sky, and okay, it might not be 100,000 meteors an hour, but it changes you. How can it not change you? And this particular meteor shower, you know, it changed people. And one of the, you know, things that sort of breaks my heart is that for some of those slaves, in the stories we heard of people lying down on the ground and believing that maybe this was it, this was the end of the world, and they were finally going to be saved. Just to wake up the next day and it be the same is just, it must be so baffling to witness something which seems, you know, heavenly and from God, and then for life to seemingly go on as normal. Now, thank God things were changing, sort of, you know, just try and instill some hope in that scenario, but it's just yeah, it really gives you something to think about this while we're looking up this evening at the Leonids. And the final thing I wanted to share with you is that because of its incredible importance, this Leonids Shower of 1833, and because it was recorded pretty much across the US, and when people have also sort of interviewed families and asked them for their oral stories, so we have a lot of archives of these stories. But it was such a special night that it's really inspired a lot of song and poetry. And one song in particular it inspired is the song "Stars Fell on Alabama." And if you haven't heard this song, it's such a beautiful song, and it's been recorded by 100 artists, including like Bing Crosby, Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong do a version, Cannonball Adderley with John Coltrane, Jimmy Buffett, just listing them here, Billie Holiday, Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, Doris Day, Vera Lynn, and more recently Harry Connick Jr., and the duo She and Him, if you know them. But it's just such an important part of the US history. And there's this, beautiful song about it. And I just wanted to read you the first 4 lines of this song. I have to put on a bit of an American accent to make it rhyme. We lived our little drama. We kissed in a field of white, and stars fell on Alabama last night. Oh, that makes me cry. Oh, goodness. So if you get a chance tonight and you're watching the Leonids, I would say put on some headphones, YouTube Billie Holiday's version of Stars Fell on Alabama, and just, open your hearts and look out for meteors, and give a thought to those who weren't free people watching that meteor shower back in 1833. So that's about it from me. I wanted to fill you in on a few things that are upcoming with Slooh. So I'll be back on the 21st, so that's next Tuesday, to talk about the Pleiades, everyone's favorite star cluster. So we'll be talking about the Pleiades. It's going to be a particularly special night. It's the midnight culmination of the Pleiades. It's the most foreboding occurrence. So I hope you join me for that tale. The Sunday after, November the 26th, we'll be doing constellation sky stories for Sundays. And we'll be starting with Taurus. So we're talking about the sacred bull throughout our humanity, and our bull in the sky, the Taurus, and some of the wonderful things in Taurus, like Aldebaran, the eye of the bull, the star, and also Pleiades is also in Taurus. And then, of course, December the 3rd is our supermoon, and we'll be inviting you all to a challenge, and that kicks off next Tuesday as well. So a lot happening next Tuesday, and hope you can join us for that and get involved in the supermoon challenge as well. So I think that's all from me. I'm so grateful to be here in company, enjoying this Leonids meteor shower and commemorating it, remembering the meteor shower of 1833. So yeah, remember, look east, and then after midnight you'll see, if you're up, you'll hopefully see a lot more meteors in the sky. So that's it from me. I'm wishing you clear skies for this evening, so you get a chance to get out and see the Leonids. Until next time, I bid you farewell.
Slooh, your interface to outer space. Here, you'll find a vibrant global community of fellow Earthlings together searching for what's out there, controlling high-powered telescopes on missions to see and understand all that lies beyond our planet. So gather with us around the looking glass